Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. And today I'm lucky enough to be with Izaz and Owen. Hello, boys.
Hi.
I'm lucky enough today to be able to discuss the art of buying and selling a business. Izaz is the principal solicitor at Laudit who deals with the acquisition side of things, and we've been around for 20 odd years, so you can imagine some of the businesses that we've sold and bought over the years has been quite extensive. So it's a huge topic and one which won't be dealt with in one podcast. There'll be a number of podcasts about this, you'll be pleased to hear is. So Izaz, morning, and when is it, from a seller's perspective, and it's almost an impossible question, but when is a good time to sell?
I always say the best sales that we've dealt with have always been people that have had the benefit of a lawyer and an accountant around them, and they've had the ability to speak to them early on, and they've had a vision and said, we want to plan a sale so that you can get your house in order. A bit like selling a house, really, is the best way to describe it. You're going to sell your house, you give it, lick of paint, you get the guttering tidied up, you don't want any leaks showing, you want to make sure the drains are all fine.
Get the marigolds out.
That's it. You're literally scrubbing, cleaning, and making everything look pretty, so that when a prospective buyer comes in, they like the look of everything, and the due diligence, which is a fancy word for the poking and prodding and the information that they want to look at and see, all checks in okay. So back to a business, when you've got an idea that, look, I want to sell this business, you need to get the business ready for a sale. You need to get your accounts in order, you need to get the bookkeeping up together, you need to get the statutory books together, you need to make sure all the employees have got contracts in place, you've got grievance procedures, disciplinary procedures, leases, or every aspect of the business you need to look at and go through a checklist and just do a quick tidy up.
It's almost as if, I remember speaking years ago about this, and it's almost as if you turn up at an office with a plastic bag full of receipts, or you have 3 or 4 lever arches contained in there, alphabetical order, sections and marks, which covers everything to do with the business, accounts, orders, contracts, so everything that you can just go, look, there's 5 lever arch files there on that desk, take them away with you, there's your due diligence.
Yes, yeah. So effectively, due diligence is undertaken by a prospective purchaser on a target business, and they will look at various heads. So
just to repeat, the buyer's solicitor usually does the due diligence.
Yes, on a seller.
Because the buyer is obviously buying. Yes, of course, it makes sense. So the buyer's solicitor says, well, the buyer's solicitor is there to make sure that his client, the buyer, isn't sold a pup, isn't sold
Correct.
Something which isn't worth the value.
Yep.
Hence the due diligence.
Correct.
Or incurs a company with tons of outgoing liabilities.
Yes.
Well,
yeah.
And does the buyer's solicitor simply just raise a few questions, or is there a proper form which sets that all out?
Yeah, so the forms, so effectively there's a number of areas that you would look at. So it would really depend on the business. So right now, I am looking at a contract in relation to a business that's regulated under the Financial Conduct Authority. FCA.
Yes, correct.
And so in relation to that, the questions that they've raised specifically will be, have you had any investigations by the FCA? Are you registered? Are there any products or services that you offer that need to be regulated by them or are unregulated by them? Do you have commission arrangements with any third parties that refer business to you? How do you maintain your independency? So that specifically in relation to that aspect of it, as an example. But equally in that business, they will raise the normal sort of things that you'd expect. So if they're occupying property, what property do you have? Is it owned? Is it leased? Disclose the lease. Have you had any issues with the landlord? Are there any breaches of the lease? Any notice has been served on you? the premises that you occupy, any issues with rights of way or the flats that are above your premises, any issues with parking, any issues with the bins. It's really a fishing net where they cast out that net and you provide answers to the questions that they raise.
And the solicitor for the seller will provide them based on instructions from the seller.
Correct. And it would be then given to the buyer's solicitor and or the buyer's accountant in relation to that aspect of it.
And presumably those answers must be truthful and accurate.
Yes. So the sort of phrase that we use is that the information provided is accurate, materially correct, not misleading.
But in terms of if you undergo disclosure with appointed solicitors, and if that disclosure produces information which the purchaser has to think twice about the deal, how does that affect, just sort of going back to say the heads of terms from the outset, when the heads of terms were signed, the heads of terms would say they were binding, and so now you want to pull out based on the fact that the information disclosed isn't as good as we originally thought. Are we in trouble? Or should we have... I don't... How do you do the timing of it in terms of you show me yours and I'll show you mine?
Yeah, so basically the heads of terms will say that these are the headlines of the deal. So back to the house example, you go with your wife to look at a house that you're interested in, and there's a nice pretty house, and your wife says, well, we're going to buy it. And you say, well, no problem, we'll buy it. But I know nothing about houses. So I'm going to have to get someone in who will have a look at it and just tell us everything's okay. So you get a surveyor in, surveyor comes in, he has a look at the house, and he makes some comments, looks at the brickwork outside and says, a bit of damp there, could do with a few air bricks on the outside. And then he looks at the roof and he says, the roof used to be slate and it's now concrete tiles, so it's bowing a little bit, needs some structural strength. And that report then comes back to you and you're sat with your wife and you say, lovely house, we want to buy it. However, Mr. Surveyor's picked up on these two things. So you approach the buyer and say, hi, Mr. Buyer, these are the issues with your house. We agreed this price, subject to contract and survey. Surveyor's picked up on this. So the owner looks at it and says, well, a couple of air bricks on the outside, but inside we've got no issue and it's nice and dry and there's no damp smell. Your guy's quoted £1,000 for that. I'm prepared to meet you halfway and knock off £500. Now the roof, no issue with the roof, but your guy's saying a roof needs to be replaced in 5 years and he wants £10,000 to replace it as a quote. I'm not prepared to go halves on that with you. I don't agree with that. And then after a bit of back and forth, he says, you know what, as a goodwill gesture, I'll give you £2,000 off it, but I'm not paying 10. And that's the end of it. So you make that decision based on the quality of that report, and you make an informed decision and you think, right, we'll buy, but these are the slight, intricacies or deductions. In relation to a business sale, when you carry out due diligence, from the seller's perspective, it's imperative, really, really, really important that you tell the truth to the lawyer acting for you and your accountant. You say, these are the problems I've got with the business, this is what I want to ward off. And then you rely on the advice of that lawyer and your accountant to safeguard your interests. And if you come across a problem in the due diligence that you think, oh, I've got this issue, how do I get around it, or what do I need to do? We need to make a disclosure of that issue. The buyer then makes an informed decision taking that into consideration. And what the buyer does to protect itself from that problem is that they seek from you as a seller a warranty. So they say that if that was to happen, only that issue, then I want a guarantee from you that you will cover the cost of it. And on occasion, they may ask for an indemnity. And an indemnity is to say that on a pound for pound basis, if it costs me £3,000 to cover that loss, then you will pay me back that £3,000. And they could do it by way of a retention, which means that, say for example, they've agreed a figure of £200,000 for the sale, and they've come across a few little problems, and they say those problems could amount to about £5,000 in total. They say, for a year, we'll keep back £5,000, and then after a year, if none of those issues come back to bite us, then we'll release that £5,000 to you, or we'll give you the 200,000, but remember you've given us a warranty and an indemnity for that £5,000 amount, so don't go spending all the money at once.
I think one thing we've noticed over the years is the importance of the warranties and indemnities. And presumably, depending on the transaction, the warranties and indemnities can go on for pages and pages and pages.
Correct, yeah. So it's again, depending on the business, whether certain aspects would creep in. So, for example, we dealt with a garage and a car repair garage, and with regards to the car repair garage, there were warranties in relation to environmental aspects, i.e. disposal of oil, disposal of tyres, and those aspects of it. So you wouldn't expect to see that with regards to the sale of a coffee shop or a coffee chain. So each business will bring about its own specific point. So with regards to a garage business, we had to disclose any issues identified by VOSA, which deal with MOTs. So there's so many other aspects of it that would creep in, and that's the beauty of the area that we deal with. That 1 minute we're selling a garage, next minute we're selling a coffee shop, a chain of coffee shops, and and next minute we're selling assets in a company or shares in a company, and it's a software business or it's a retail outlet.
I mean, I presume that in terms of the amount of warranties and indemnities, who usually gives them? The seller, always.
Yes.
The purchaser wouldn't have no need, would he? Of course.
Yeah. So the purchaser would give limited warranties, and the limited sort of warranties from them we would expect are, if it was a company, that they've got the legal right and authority to enter into the agreement, that the agreement that they're entering into, that they're going to continue the business in its current form. For example, if there's going to be some completion accounts that are due to happen, or a net asset value is going to be calculated, then the seller will want assurances that they're going to continue with that business to the point where the accounts are produced, and then they can get their payout, and then off they go with regards to that.
Because I often think and advise clients that, especially if you're selling, warranties and indemnities are essential, of course, but at the same time, it's about exposure, isn't it? So if I'm selling a business which let's just ridiculously, it's £5 million, the purchaser is going to want significant warranties and indemnities for that value, isn't it?
Correct. And if there is an area of concern, as I said earlier, it'd be for the seller to disclose that to his lawyers and his accountants, that issue, and then between them, i.e. lawyer and accountant conversation, we would make what we call a disclosure, and that disclosure would be this warranty that you're seeking, saying that, for example, there's no investigations in relation to any investigation by HMRC in relation to corporation tax, PAYE, VAT, and we would say there is a disclosure here, there was an investigation and it's not been concluded. It was in relation to that, it started in 2020 and it's not yet been concluded. This is what HMRC have come up with, this is what we feel is a correct figure, this is our potential exposure. That's what we call a disclosure. And a buyer can then look at that and think, okay, they've disclosed that, and he can ask his own team to verify that information and ask further questions in relation to it, so that they can work out whether they feel it's a risk for them or not. So that's the way that we would come around it. And if, for example, you're selling a business and you disclose all the contracts of the business, and you forget you get a knock on the door every November because the local guy's coming in to check your fire extinguishers and check your smoke alarms, and he's on a contract for £250 a year, and you think, oh my God, I forgot to disclose that as an ongoing contract for the business. What we draft into the contracts is something called a de minimis value, and that is that if we've got any of these contracts or anything in place, again depending on the sale value, anything for under £1,000, which cumulatively would amount with others to £3,000, then we're not interested. You can't put a claim in against the seller for that. So it's there to sort of mop up the bin guys that come outside to collect your waste, and the odd contract here and there that you've not disclosed that is at such a sort of low value that it wasn't picked up. So there's got to be a threshold in there, because otherwise, if it's a multi-million-pound business they're bound to forget something that is really, really low end of the scale that, just wouldn't ordinarily get picked up. So there are caveats and safeguards that we can help and put in place to safeguard the interests of the seller.
And one thing that I'm often asked as well is the role of a third party. So going back to the beginning when I mentioned when do you decide to buy and sell? You mentioned property earlier on, and of course we use estate agents to be the third party to sell a house on your behalf. Many SMEs don't know any purchasers. They don't even discuss it, perhaps discuss it at board level. Kind of nice to sell a business nowadays after all these years. But they haven't got a purchaser in mind. Just tell me what your views are about the brokers, the positives and the negatives, and the company brokers who sell or buy and sell your business for you for a fee. Any thoughts on that type of particular approach? There are the good and the bad, I presume, like everything.
Yeah, so there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think the most important thing is this, that when you have a discussion with any of the agents, always go by recommendations and look at the industry and the sector that you are in and look at who are the movers and shakers. It's a bit like, if you go into an area and you're wanting to sell your house, you think, who sells properties in my area? So you go online and you do a bit of research and you say, these two agents are the ones that are really sort of shifting property in my area. So they're likely to be the people that you're going to want to speak to because they've got contacts, they've got list of customers that are looking at buying in that area, perhaps for the park nearby or the school nearby, the locality of the shops or any other reason. So with regards to the agents, you need to do your homework to look at, who's advertising the your type of businesses in that area, and what is their reputation like. And then it's a very, very important aspect of your life to sell your business and the ongoing, warranties and indemnities and the ongoing relationship that you're going to have. So do go out and meet or set up Zoom meetings or the likes and speak to them before you sign up and get a feel of what they've got to say. Get a feel of what they've got to say about the market and the industry that you're in. Speak to your accountant, see if he's got any recommendations. Speak to your lawyers, but never sign any terms without having a keen eye look over those terms for you. So if you're engaging a lawyer, ask your lawyer to look at the terms that have been sent across to you from the agents or brokers that are looking at brokering your business. Look at the sort of commission rates, look at the tie-in periods, avoid a long tie-in period. If someone wants to sell your business and they're keen on doing it and they claim they've got the experience, they're not going to need you to sign up to a 3-year term, more like an exclusivity of a 3-month term as opposed to anything like that. And then perhaps, a ratcheted commission at a future date. I think that's the key aspect of it. So look at what they're offering and look at what they've done in the past to see, do they, stand by what they're saying, or the review's good.
And I think also watch out for the small print, because a lot of these more pro forma brokerage companies, they have very small print in the terms and conditions that say, in the event that you do sell them out, how you sell it, you've still got to pay us commission. So over the years we've seen a knock on the door where the business has said, gosh, they didn't do anything for me, and 2 years later I sold it on my own back. The next thing I know, I'm being charged 15%.
Yeah.
So you've got to be careful. Read the terms.
Yeah, that's very important. So basically, they work on a sole agency or exclusivity.
Yeah.
And sole agency, which is effective exclusivity for them, and then multi-agency. Again, those sort of terms are often used in property transactions as well when you're marketing to sell a house. So it's no different with these guys as well. There's a lot of information and that needs to go in to get the brochures and to market the business effectively. So again, it's another exercise of you need to be ready. So you need to have your accounts and your management accounts and cash flow forecasts, and make sure you've got your VAT records, PAYE, corporation tax, everything nice and in order. And then your accountant can then liaise with the agents to provide that input information, and for them to then display that information, portray that information in a pretty way, like a nice pie chart, graphs and and what have you, and then work out, averages to show.
The working closely with an accountant is essential, isn't it? I mean, we work with Paul and Izaz at
absolutely key.
Action Tax.
So that's absolutely key, because it's the same thing, that you can work with your existing lawyers to deal with a transaction, but what is their experience in dealing with transactions in terms of sort of volumes and experience within the industry? That's absolutely key. And the same thing with accountants, that we work with a client's existing accountant, but where we see that the accountant for any given reason is either struggling with something, or he may not have the experience to deal with it, we always reach out to the client and say, look, we've got a group of accountants that we work with that are experts in buying and selling businesses. They know the industry very well. They can provide significant assistance to us to work at the pace that we require to be able to get something done. So we introduce the accountants to them and ask them just to come in as consultants effectively and provide that service. And incidentally, we work with other lawyers as well as consultants, purely in relation to this field. So it will be another firm of solicitors who's got a client who's looking at either buying or selling a business, and they don't have the internal resources or the expertise potentially to deal with this, and they ask us to come in as consultants and, can you advise on this agreement? Can you put together a disclosure letter? Can you review this agreement and negotiate the terms of the agreement? Can you put together the board minutes and all the other sort of ancillary documentation in relation to resignation, settlement agreements, share transfer, stock transfer forms, and the like? So we can provide that assistance, being on the front foot ourselves as Laudit solicitors and or as consultants for them.
Brilliant. It's very useful. I think next time we'll talk about one thing that I'm often asked is assets or shares. How do I sell? Am I selling assets? Am I selling shares? Am I selling both? It's just one thing out the other. And it often confuses people. So we'll pick up on that next time. But thank you. Izaz, thank you.
Thank you.
And all the best, everybody.